go ahead and start by introducing myself. I think all three of us will give a quick introduction of ourselves and our projects. My name's Chelsea Pires. I go by Chelsea Rose. And I, like Nadia said, am the Harm Reduction Operations Manager for Zendo Project. I've been working with the Zendo Project since 2013. I'm also a licensed associate marriage and family therapist, and I'll be taking my licensure exam in March, so almost at the end of a very long process with that. And then I work as an on-call supervisor for our local crisis team that I managed for 2 years prior to moving full-time to Zendo in May. So I have a lot of experience in crisis intervention. And then lastly, I work with Dance Safe, which is a public health organization promoting health and safety in the nightlife and electronic music festival, which they've been music community, which they've been doing for over 20 years. And specifically, I work in managing their reagent test kit program. So yeah, happy to be here. Laura and Amanda, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. Hi everybody. So I'm Amanda. I've been working with PsyCare for about 7 or 8 years now. I've been curious about drugs from a very young age, specifically the disparity between sort of the information that was fed to us by media and the adults in my life, and the multitude of people that would continue to take these substances regularly. I remember thinking, surely they can't all be playing Russian roulette every weekend. So I wanted to know more. Fast forward 10 years and found myself going to parties and being surrounded by people in various states, and also eventually having my own experiences, and sort of quickly realized on a personal level the profound benefits that these substances had, but also saw that not everyone was necessarily having these positive experiences. Fast forward another 10 years and I find myself here, having helped many people have a gentle landing, and having the pleasure of talking to you guys today. So yeah, thanks for having me and thanks for being here.
Hi, my name is Laura. By occupation, I'm a health psychologist. I've done a couple of clinical placements in psychological and psychiatric wards. And I guess like Amanda, I'm quite a sensation seeker. So I had the pleasure of starting to experiment with substances at quite a young age. And what I really learned by doing, and that's something that I would like to change with the work that we do at PsyCare, so that not everyone has to learn for themselves what preparation and aftercare and processing looks like, but that we got a good starting place. Yeah, so I've been with PsyCare for 8 years and I've been loving it. I learned so much about myself and about people, but we'll tell you more about that in a minute.
I can tell you all a little bit more about the Zendo project. Nadia gave a little bit of an intro there, so thanks for that, Nadia. So the Zendo project is an organization that has focused on providing peer support for people undergoing difficult psychedelic or psychological experiences at large events and gatherings. And then additionally, Zendo has provided training and education in a variety of settings, and that's really been our focus, especially during COVID while events haven't been happening. And Zendo Project is a part of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies Harm Reduction Department. MAPS started providing peer support services in the early 2000s, and then Zendo, it was incepted as Zendo in 2012 at Burning Man. And we've trained approximately 2,000 volunteers and supported over 5,000 guests since 2012. The mission of the Zendo project is to provide professional, comprehensive harm reduction and education and support for communities to help inform and transform difficult psychedelic experiences into opportunities for learning and growth. And as as a vision, we envision a world where communities are educated and resourced and engaged in applying harm reduction principles to support individuals exploring psychedelic states, recognizing that challenging experiences, like I said, can be opportunities for self-exploration and healing. PsyCare, if you want to share a little bit more about your project, that'd be great.
Sure. So we began about 12 to 13 years ago Originally, we were known as Cosmic Air UK. Our founder, Karine, grew up in South America and spent much of her time in the Brazilian jungle, dancing and connecting with nature, and sparking her interest in plant teachers. In 1991, she traveled to India and encountered the Goa parties, and in her words, a serious amount of psychedelic experiences. It was here that she saw the connection between dance that has always been an innate part of Indigenous cultures and the modern day dance floor. 35 years, or in the 35 years since then, she's been an active part of celebrations, gatherings, and festivals around the world, witnessing and experiencing many heightened states of consciousness, and also many cases of people struggling through the process. In 2007, Karine volunteered with Cosmic Air at Boom Festival in Portugal, and straight away saw that there was a need for a similar care at UK events, and decided to take matters into her own hands. She did a call out for helpers, for pillows, for duvets. Just a year later, began to offer safe spaces to those in need. Since then, the project has gained interest from people from all walks of life. We've gathered interest from doctors, from psychotherapists, researchers, to hairdressers, and even professional axe throwers. Just one, actually. But we've worked at about 5 to 10 festivals per year since then, although albeit last year. In the last 3 years, we helped, officially we helped 1,000 people in the last 3 years. That's not including those that pass by just for information, to ask questions, or to hang out at our fire. In 2015, we registered as a charity, and then changed our name to Psycho UK in 2017, just to better reflect what we do, as we focus specifically on the psychological and the emotional difficulties that come about, specifically around psychedelic substances. We've grown organically through sheer love and passion for the project. We're not funded, so the way we are able to function is gaining kind donations through our supporters and through the work that we do at events. Long term, we've got a vision to have a centre that is open all year round for integration and healing. We've been lucky enough to have been donated property in the mountains of North Italy, and we're currently looking into ways of getting that happening. It needs a lot of work done, so yeah, just looking into ways to raise funds and get that project off the ground.
I think it's fair to say that all in all, we're an incredibly endearing project with little bell tents and fires going and loads of people that just want to do the best to support everyone at a festival. So I always experience Psyche as incredibly sweet, really, if you wanted to sum that up in some word. There's definitely more organized organizations, but Psyche is incredibly caring and sweet. I think what we wanted to do next was to tell you 3 stories, like 3 care stories that were memorable for us as carers, and that also guide the work that we do today. And after those stories, we will tell you about the different principles of our projects, and we can use those stories to illustrate the principles and the values that we apply to our work. Chelsea, do you feel comfortable starting?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's just been such a blessing over the years to work with so many different people in a variety of altered states, or going through difficult experiences. I just have some wonderful memories in our community. And so it's hard to pull a particular one to mind, but in talking with Laura and Amanda, one of the stories that came to mind was an experience of a person who was in an altered state, and while in their altered state, they felt the need to repeatedly stand up and fall backwards. And in the falling backwards, they wanted to be caught. And so we had a lovely team of people who stepped up to catch this person who wanted to fall backwards and be caught. And this went on for several hours. So it was really incredible to see how our team stepped in to help as needed and would take turns And I hope to imagine that this was somewhat like a trust fall. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced a trust fall, but essentially that they felt that they could let go and fall back and have these people that they didn't even know catch them. And so I hope that they walked away from this experience with a newfound trust for whatever it was that was arising in that moment that wanted them to have that experience. So we can come back to pieces of the work that we do and how it relates to this particular moment.
Thanks for that, Chelsea. So I've got a story about acid loops or thought loops. People get trapped, they can get trapped within a chain of thought. Just as a sort of minor example is a question that leads to an answer, which leads back to the original question. And they kind of get stuck in that pattern, sometimes just for a short while, but sometimes it can be hours. So the example that I'm going to give, I wasn't actually personally on shift for this. I'd finished my shift that morning. I'd gone out to enjoy the party. I popped back to the tent to get a drink from our kitchen. And as I've gone past one of our tents, I've just seen two of my colleagues with a girl in our bell tent, looking a little bit drained, a little bit exhausted. I've just kind of given them a sort of understanding nod and gone off to get my drink. One of my colleagues has followed me into the tent, into the kitchen rather, just asking if I could possibly step in, because I think they've been with her for about 6 hours at this point, and it was just a repetitive loop. And you know, it's important for ourselves. The saying goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if it gets to a point that it's draining on you, sometimes it's important to get someone else to step in. So I went in and sort of just spent some time getting myself familiar with the loop. And in this particular case, she started off completely wrestling, really fighting, resisting, screaming, terrified. Kind of whatever was going on for her, she just didn't want to know. And then suddenly she would switch and would go completely calm and just look at me really matter of factly and go, "Oh, I get it now. I see, you've got to kill me quickly." Then, like, really, like, okay, come on. But then the realization of what she'd just said kicked off the resistance and the panic again, understandably. So after we'd sort of been going around for a while with things like, "Of course not, no, you're okay," maybe because I'd been out playing, I wasn't officially on shift, I felt like I'd gained enough trust to be a little bit risky with it. So I started to sort of change my answers to things like, "I'd rather not think of the trouble that I'd get in," or "I'd rather not think of the mess." And then I just went, okay, like after we've been around a few times with these different answers, and she went, "Okay, you've got to kill me quickly then." And I went, "Okay, how?" And she suddenly was like, "What?" And I just laughed and smiled at her and was like, "You're not so sure now, are you?" And she burst out laughing and was like, "Oh God, guys, I'm so sorry. How long have I been doing this? You must have been, like, I must have been driving you crazy." And then was aware of her own loop coming back. So she went, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Here it goes again." And off she went again. But it just kind of broke that pattern a little bit. We were able to play around with the answers a little bit. And she was, yeah, in a totally different headspace and able to play around with us a little bit. So we'll delve more into, again, the kind of different dynamics of that later on.
Thank you, Amanda. I do love this story. So when we were coming up with those different stories that we wanted to tell you, we were thinking about sort of the learning outcomes that we take away from this work as well. And something that I learned was the power of prevention and just being with someone. When I first started as a carer, I was so excited. I turned up for my shift 10 minutes early. I wore my little lanyard and I was just like, "Where's the work? Let me do this. Come on." And that's not how it works usually. And I started realizing most of our work is in lighting a fire at the beginning of the festival and being a point of contact, of grounding, of connecting people to place and time, and preventing harm before it happens, because a lot of substance use goes wrong when people obviously take the wrong substances in the wrong kind of combination, in the wrong kind of setting. And often people try to amplify their pleasure at a festival by taking even more substances. So for us, we have this amazing opportunity to make people feel connected to a festival just by being there, just by them having chats with us or meeting each other around the campfire. So something that for me, with my very German attitude of we need to be efficient and we need to work, looked like hanging around was such an important part of our work. We don't need to fix something. Often we can't fix anything. What we can do is be there for someone though. So this was really my learning, like my learning epiphany, so to speak, to just create a place where people can arrive and feel part of this experience. And that actually leads on nicely, let's see what we're doing here. This leads really nicely to our project principles. I will start with the psych care principles. I think we got about, let me see. Yeah, we got 7 of them, and Chelsea will contribute bits about Zendo in there as well. And I hope you recognize these principles in the case studies that we told you about. So the first principle of psych care is mutual aid. And I love this one. We believe in a world centered around mutual aid, whereby individuals share responsibility to look out for and take care of each other to the best of their ability and means. In our view, the well-being of each individual is integral to the well-being of the whole. And for me, this really just separates an amazing festival from a shit festival. At a shit festival, everyone is out for themselves, maybe looks out for their mates, but that's about it. An excellent festival is one where we are all in this experience together, and we'll all have a better time if we are all having a good time. And that means stepping up and sharing responsibility and looking out for each other and not being shy to help. Often doing something is still better than doing nothing at all. So this is the kind of community that we want to create, one that looks out for each other and supports one another. Oh my God, I got goosebumps. Amanda, integrity?
Sure. So integrity, we are open and honest. We strive to be aware of how our own belief systems, values, needs, and limitations affect our work. So we, on one hand, bring our beliefs into what we're doing. We very much believe, as Laura just said, in sort of caring for one another and helping each other out. But we're also aware that when you're sitting for somebody, it's important not to put those beliefs, various beliefs, onto those people. We're very much sitting, not guiding. But we'll come to that a little bit later. Laura?
Nice. Psych value 3, inclusivity, equality, and tolerance. For me, this meant learning that if someone is having a difficult experience and shouts racial slurs at me, that's okay. And I will just be with that. This person is still deserving of my support and care. This also meant learning that someone might try to put out a cigarette on me because they think I'm a flying dinosaur. I will still be there. I'm present. I still care. And I ask for the help from my team. So that's what I understand as inclusivity, equality, and tolerance. However people come to us, we will help. We will try to help to our best efforts.
So, psych value 4, safe space and consent. We create a safe space where closeness and touch are considered very carefully. Our volunteers understand the importance of consent, especially when working with vulnerable people. So I suppose what I'd say in this case is, okay, in terms of closeness and touch, it's considered very carefully. So a misplaced hug, just because a hug is generally considered a lovely thing, if somebody is really resistant to having a hug at that time, then it's gonna, it's gonna do more damage to that situation than good. Equally, a safe space can be where we've got 2 different tents set up. So we have one that is really, it's my favorite, it's the bell tent, and it's got a beautiful shrine. It's got curtains to kind of separate off little sleeping areas, and just lots of little pretty things to look at. It's a very calming environment, and so that's for somebody that is possibly having a bit more of an intense time and needs to get away from the intensity of the festival. And then you've got others that turn up and they're a bit more energetic, they're a bit more hyper, and they just, they've lost their friends, they're a bit disorientated, but they need somewhere to kind of burn off a bit of energy. So we have the other tent that is a bit more for that. So yeah, the 2 don't interact with each other too much. Or it could be meeting somebody on the dance floor because that's where they need to be, and so we're just there to keep them safe and create a safe space around them. I know that Chelsea had some things to say around safe space, so I'll pass it to Chelsea.
Why don't you go through your 7 and then I'll come back to those and just add to them. How does that sound? Good. Okay.
Yeah, I really love the PsyCare setup. I haven't experienced Zendo yet, but it was like, can I say this on camera? It was like a rite of passage to me when I ended up in this bell tent myself. Amazing care. I can highly recommend it. Right, PsyCare value 5. Growth and improvement. We are committed to improving and growing both as an organization and individuals. We regularly reflect upon and review our practices, procedures, and training. This means that after every single person that anyhow comes into contact with our care, we fill in loads of protocols and forms and really fun Excel sheets so that we know how to train our volunteers and that we can educate festivals and also the medical crews at festivals about how to deal with people that are experiencing difficulty due to substances or whatever psychological distress. So we're continuously trying to get better at what we're doing.
PsyCare value 6. Passionate and professional. Our team are passionate about and committed to what we do. We conduct ourselves in a way that is professional and avoid unnecessary risks. So we are always, you know, as much as, you know, we deal with so many various things, and as a team we try and encompass all of that as much as we can, but equally we've got to be aware of our own safety and the safety of the people that come into our care. So if, you know, often things will come to us from the medical team where they realize it's not a medical issue and they, you know, they need our input, but often we'll do the other way around. We, you know, we work closely with the medics. There's it's better to be safe than sorry, so we always call the medics over to review anyone that we're concerned about, and just generally looking after ourselves as well. So making sure that, you know, there's a team around, so no one's on their own in any one situation, unless that's the best way to deal with the situation. There's calm. And yeah, just being aware of all of these different things to kind of make sure everybody is safe. Sure.
Yeah, I guess that also includes understanding our own limitations as carers. We do have doctors on the team and we do have psychologists on the team and a whole lot of other amazing people that bring so many skills to the table. But we need to know when we have to hand over to authorities and when we have to let security staff know and when we have to call an ambulance for someone. So we need to know that we can't help with everything. Value 7. We're non-judgmental, neutral, and pragmatic. We offer non-judgmental services to everyone. We do not, I repeat, we do not encourage the use of drugs or other risky behaviors. Yes, it may be true that all of our carers have had experiences with substances in the past or in the present and may have in the future, because otherwise we couldn't do this kind of work. But we do in no way encourage taking drugs. We provide education, we raise awareness, and we do not tolerate anyone taking drugs while they are around our bell tents and our fireplace. And we do never ever turn up fucked on shift, and we do not ever take drugs with our carees. So this is really important, because I was trying to justify to my mom this morning why I'm speaking at this conference, and she was getting mighty scared, thinking I was promoting this. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I learned my lesson and I'm trying to spare that one. So yeah.
If I could just add something there, because I saw somebody has put in the conversation that, yeah, you know, it's not about advocating for these things or promoting these things or whatever, but equally people take drugs, people mistake drugs, people take drugs expecting a good time and have a bad time, and those people shouldn't be discarded just because they've chosen to do that thing. Deal with the situation at hand. Conversations can be had later about possibly, you know, making different choices or more informed choices or whatever, but yeah, it's all about dealing with the situation at hand without judgment.
if
Chelsea, I think
you,
we can hand over to you.
Chelsea looks frozen.
Oh no, I think she might be frozen. Do you guys, is Chelsea about to speak about some of the extra thing? Oh, she's gone. She's gone. I'll appear. Hello. I can't do Chelsea's bit, sadly. Hey guys. Hello, nice to see you again. If is Chelsea about to do the principles from Zendo?
Yes.
If you have them in front of you, you could cover them, or we can just gently move to the next bit, and if Chelsea comes back, we can maybe quickly revisit.
I would prefer some Q&As now, actually, and then for
Mm.
Chelsea to come back with Zendo. Would that be okay?
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Great idea. I'll let Nadia run that.
Yeah, that's fine. So I've been having a look, lots of questions coming in. So yeah, just before, whilst Chelsea comes back, hopefully she's just experiencing some technical difficulties. I did notice her drop off earlier. So first question that we've had this a couple of times actually. So I think it's just basically, oh, is Chelsea back?
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can hear you. Do you want me to carry on with Q&A, or do you want to carry on with your presentation?
Yeah, I could go through our principles briefly. Maybe I'll turn off my video so that I'm just having some trouble with my Wi-Fi, of course, go figure. So
Oh, I think you might have gone. Chelsea?
Oh no.
can you hear me?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you're back.
Ugh. I'm so sorry. Of course, my Wi-Fi goes unstable now, right? If I just thinking I leave my video off and try and cover the principles, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. All right. Let me move over there and back to my screen. Okay. Hey, Laura, will you just, I can see you. Will you wave your hand at me if I'm dropping out again? Okay, perfect. All right, sounds great. Okay, so the Zendo has 4 principles, so I can be fairly swift with them. Our 4 principles are safe space, sitting, not guiding, talking through, not down, and difficult is not the same as bad. And so you'll see how these interweave with the principles that Laura and Amanda shared. So the first principle is safe space, which Amanda shared when she was talking about safe space and consent. And the way that I look at safe space is really as a foundational component. All of us need safety, right? We all need safety as a basic human need. And safety can come in many forms. It can be our mindset. It can be the environment that we're in, the set and setting, even the relationships that we're around. And so, I just encourage everyone here to just take a moment to ask yourself, what is safe to you? Different qualities make us feel safe. For me, I like to be somewhere warm. I like warm lighting. I like to be among familiar people, non-judgment. And also it's great to recognize that different qualities of a safe space are different for different people. What they would prefer is different for different people. And of course, it includes acting with integrity and having consent in your interactions with the people around you. And so sitting, not guiding is the second principle. And this is actually my favorite principle because it's in some ways so simple, and it's just about being, which can be really challenging for us as doers and as people who really feel the need to fix what's going on. It can be hard to see someone going through a difficult experience, and we want to be able to change that for them. But the sitting, not guiding is really about just being, and that sort of presence of being totally present can be so impactful, especially because if you're present with yourself and you're there in your presence, it can give the other person permission to be present to their experience. And I always encourage people to just be in that beginner's mind. It can actually be relieving to say, wow, I actually don't have to do anything. I can just be here and observe and hold space and be present and then see what arises out of that. Additionally, it really allows people to access their own innate wisdom and their inner guide. And so we really want to, in that sitting, support someone in discovering what is occurring for them and what's true for them. So you can support expression, you can reflect what they're saying to you, you can even give small offerings such as tea or a blanket or snacks or anything of comfort. And then, of course, there are times when appropriate action is needed. And so that might be when you need to just keep somebody safe. Like Laura gave the example of a cigarette, you know, someone where you want to step in, of course, and create safety. And, you know, reframing at times, someone will say, this is this really horrible thing that's happening. And we might encourage them to look at it through a different frame to see how it might be, it might be possible that what they're experiencing has another perspective or another way of being looked at. And then, you know, again, if we're doing the guiding of any sort, it should be back toward themselves. So we want to guide them toward their own experience. And then, you know, to provide basic help if they need to call a friend, and if you're at an event and they need to find their tent, you know, there's, of course, we're going to step in and provide that sort of support. So our third principle is talking through, not down. So that's basically what it sounds like. If someone's having a hard time, even if if you imagine yourself with a friend and they're having a hard time and you say to them, stop having a hard time, you know, just quit. Like, it's never effective, right? The only way through is to go through that experience with them, understand what's happening. And often the best thing you can give someone, especially in an altered state, is just time. And just to give space for that time to occur and encourage people to turn toward their experience and toward what's happening to discover what is there. And also giving permission to go through what they're going through and to be in that space that they're in, and trusting that the experience will be valuable, that it will that something is occurring for a reason and that there is value in that, and that the best way is just to turn toward it and work with it. And often when we stop resisting, I always say, we say what resist persists. And it's kind of like Amanda's story where someone was in a loop, and when she didn't resist that person's loop, they were able to catch themselves in their loop. So that can be really helpful, you know, as we just kind of surrender into what is occurring and allow it to unfold. And then the fourth principle, difficult is not the same as bad. So I'm sure many of you many times have heard the phrase bad trip. And we really try to lean away from that phrase because what we recognize is that it's in our most difficult experiences in our lives and when we're in struggle that we find the opportunities for learning, change, healing, growth. And, you know, if you think back in your own life about the most profound moments where, you know, you ask yourself, were those easy times? And also, you know, how have the challenging experiences in your life shaped who you are and taught you about yourself? And so, you know, it's those experiences, those difficult times that really bring our aliveness to the surface and provide opportunities for us to see ourselves in different ways and to bring growth and change into our lives. So those are the Zendo's 4 principles. And then the other piece that I just wanted to add, and Laura and Amanda, you can catch me if you said this while I was out, but just the importance of self-care. You know, because as caretakers, right, we, most of us who find ourselves doing this work are by nature caretakers. And as helpers, we're infamous for helping others at the cost of our own well-being. But of course, taking care of yourself is essential. You're number one. And so I always encourage people to look out for signs of burnout, whether that's exhaustion, irritability, feeling sick, foggy or numb, a difficult time focusing, difficult time regulating body temperature, and just knowing where your limitations are and encouraging you when you're taking care of anybody in any context to really, you know, when you're exhausted and you just feel like you don't have it anymore, to reach out and ask for help, and just make sure you're meeting your hydration and nutrition and rest and your own connection needs, so that you can really show up and be there for others. So that's what I have for now. I'm going to see if my camera is going to let me turn it back on. But Laura and Amanda, did you cover, or were we going to do integration and aftercare, or did you cover that when I popped out?
We were going to cover that as a sort of as a closing, you know.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Mhm. That also means that we are open to Q&As now.
Lovely. So we've had, as I said before, we've got a lot of questions that have come in. And I think I'll start with this one. So you mentioned previously about how prevention is the best thing and how a lot of your work is focused around prevention, and by creating an inviting environment, and sort of, you mentioned lighting fires and bell tents, but could you give some more examples of strategies behind prevention of bad experiences at the start of festivals and throughout?
I could start with that one. The way that I like to look at this is to imagine that you're packing and going on a trip, like a vacation kind of trip, right? Like before you go on a trip, you're going to have plans, you're going to pack your bags, you're going to know who you're visiting and who you're going to be with, you're going to know where you're staying. And so I think of it similar as that. What sort of planning would you do for any trip? And that might include, you know, having an emergency backup plan. What if things go wrong? What would you do in that case? Knowing the place that you're visiting and knowing where the emergency services are. So if that's at an event, you know, but when you get to an event, best to take some time and settle in and find out where is the medical tent, where is PsyCare or Zendo or services such as that, where can you get support you need, where's food and water, that sort of thing. And then, you know, you might also have your first aid kit, and just also, I also really encourage a buddy system in certain events that can really help us look out for one another. And then of course, I think the safety harm reduction around testing. So if you're able to test the substances that you're going to take, that's number one. I don't know how testing is working in the UK. Here in the US, you can buy reagent test kits. And then there's also websites where you can send samples of the substances that you have and get a full understanding of what is in those, the substance that you have. So Laura or Amanda, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I don't know if the question was more geared towards what we do in terms of on-site harm reduction, as well as sort of like bell tents and things like that. So I suppose it's a case of having things like we have a lot of different information available in terms of leaflets and things like that. We sell reagent tests, which Chelsea just mentioned, which are available so people can actually test their substances on site. It's very difficult to kind of, you know, people can come and have conversations about things. We have a huge chart that is done by TripSit, I think is the name of the organisation, and they did like a cross-reference of interactions. So people can come and possibly even look at things like combinations that they normally do, like alcohol and ketamine, and see that it's actually quite a dangerous combination. And then that will open up a conversation which, you know, might make them realise that something they do every weekend is maybe not such a good idea, and spend the rest of their weekend with that in mind and hopefully doing things a little bit differently. So yeah, that's what I'd love to say on that.
Yeah, I would just quickly add that what I find surprising again and again and again, of course I did this as a teenager as well, was to not even barely cover my basic human needs before going tripping. Like, I had no idea where the toilets are. I did not have anything to drink. I had no jacket. I didn't know where the fuck I was and how long this was going to take. So honestly, like, my one takeaway advice for prevention is just cover your basic needs for like peas and water and food and warmth, like at least that.
I think that's a really nice way to put it. And I really liked your analogy, Chelsea, of thinking of it as though you're packing for a trip, like a physical trip. I think that really puts it into perspective. So I know, Amanda, you just touched on this a little bit briefly now, but just to open it out to the rest of you, are there any alternative ways of making an impact on harm reduction whilst there are no festivals going on in this pandemic?
Yeah, so I suppose as with everything, everybody's looking at going onto the digital world a little bit more. So we're currently looking at putting together originally we were planning a 2-day training weekend with a venue and whatever, but it's becoming very real that we're not going to be able to do that either with safely distancing people or be able to have enough people there. So we're looking at doing some sort of online training and outreach videos that we can do that have more harm reduction information on them, and where people can just kind of reach out. We've actually started doing our virtual campfire as well, once a month, which is essentially like Laura was saying earlier, having a campfire that is burning all weekend, which, you know, kind of like moths to flames. If people are feeling a little bit uneasy, there's a friendly fire, they'll go and sit and maybe open conversation with somebody. So yeah, we've just opened up a public forum, and people can drop into that. The link's available on our Facebook and page every weekend, every month. So yeah, that's kind of our way of trying to reach out a little bit and just open a bit of conversation during lockdown anyway.
Do any of you, the rest of you, want to answer at all? Maybe hearing from Zendo? I guess it's pretty universal. All right, so another question. I think it was Laura who might have mentioned this. I'm not actually too sure, but one of you said that you need to know when to draw the line and when you're supposed to call the authorities. Where is that line? What constitutes that line?
Thanks for asking. So one thing that we also check when people arrive with us, and they may not always be in a state where they can answer these questions, but we do try to figure out if people are already on medication that might interact with substances that they are taking. We've had people that decide to go on a festival, and because they want to have a good time that weekend, they go off their schizophrenic prescription drugs. And that triggers a whole psychosis, which has nothing to do with any substances they take at the festival. Or someone might be on a certain kind of medication, and having half a joint triggers some horrific experience off in them. So, so I completely lost my thread. Can you please rephrase the question?
Yeah, just sort of, when is it that you ask for help from authorities when things do go a little bit wrong?
Yeah, so we try to be the first point of contact, because when people do experience these kind of difficulties, we are usually best equipped to deal with it. The last thing you want when you're having a difficult time is some nurse running after you who really wants to take your blood pressure, or some security guard who feels very strongly about restraining you and like checking your ID or some bullshit like that. So we do try to welcome people with open arms and kind of scoop them up. But also, if we see that after hours and hours and hours, or sometimes after a whole day, someone doesn't come out of the experience, then this might be a case of looking at their phone if they have an emergency number, seeing if we can get hold of their best pal, or even in the end, I know this is super painful, calling their parents if we find their number on their phone, because we need to make sure that these people are safe. So if they don't snap out of something after a definite amount of time, and we have pass this person on to different carers and we can't help, then we need to say like, okay, like we can't help anymore here. And that also applies to medical situations, that you can suffer severe damage to your organs, to your heart, to your brain if you mix a whole lot of amphetamines and other fun stuff together. And so we need to be able to see if someone's situation is stabilizing and improving, or if they just keep on the same level and slowly getting worse and worse. And that is definitely time to hand over to an ambulance.
I would add a little piece to that as well, Nadia, which is that if you're not at an event and you're just in question, like you're feeling really worried, say somebody is decompensating, like Laura said, and you're just really unclear whether or not you have the ability to take care of them, especially medically, I would say that it's best to default to get help when needed. And maybe that means reaching out to nurses or doctors that are friends first, but essentially, you know, if you're worried someone's in an emergency, take them to the hospital or take them to the ER. And it can also really help to know your, you know, there's a lot of instances where, because people are afraid to take someone to the hospital in altered state because they're afraid to get in trouble. And so it's really great to know your local amnesty, medical amnesty laws, or your Good Samaritan laws. But again, at the end of the day, it's better to take someone to the hospital, even if it might mean getting in trouble, if it means saving their lives. So, that can be a really hard moment to get to. But again, I think leaning toward playing it safe is a great idea. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I mean, I suppose there's also a difference between signs of things that are a medical emergency, which is, if they're, sweating excessively for what they've done or whatever. But if we're talking in terms of psychedelics, and it's, we're talking more of a psychological or an emotional side of things. Sometimes, for example, a friend of mine was having a really, really heavy meltdown, and I called a friend for help initially because it was just a case of this thing needing to wear off, and obviously through my experience with the charity, just knowing I needed more hands. But due to just the fact that he was so in this world and so scared and was sort of kind of fighting us, and between the two of us, we weren't able to hold him down, and it got to a point that if we didn't call an ambulance, he would have put himself in one. So it made sense for us to hand that over. So it's not always necessarily because of medical emergency, but just in terms of the capacity that is available to you.
I think that's really lovely. It's a really nice way you put it. I think it seems like you have to sort of strike a balance between your intuition and training. And there was actually another question that sort of popped up when, Amanda, you were talking about the thought loop sort of story when you were telling that story. And it was, have you struggled or pondered on the question of following your intuition versus your training or theory that you've been taught when doing harm reduction? And how do you trust yourself and build confidence to follow your intuition?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's a conversation that comes up a lot, which is where is that line between intuition and training, as you say. But I think so much of our training is conceptual, but in terms of the specific things that you do within each situation can be very intuitive. And I suppose that comes with experience. And it's a really fine line between something that Laura said earlier, where it was it's better doing something than nothing, but equally it's a balance of doing just enough, so you're not kind of overdoing the situation. So sometimes just silently sitting with somebody is much nicer than leaving them alone. If you don't know what to do when you're sitting with them, that doesn't matter. Sitting with them is still better than not doing anything. So even though it can feel like you're sitting there doing nothing, the presence in itself is great. I suppose in terms of interjecting, so I suppose I purposely used quite an out there example with the story that I gave, just because it's one of those situations where there is no way in a textbook I would ever say, if somebody's in a trip and saying that they need to die or need to be killed, that you should ask them how, because that is not going to work for every situation. You need to be really kind of, but I felt like she'd been with people within our team long enough that she'd built a trust. She wasn't trying to get away from us, it was her own thoughts. She was aware that we were okay and safe people. I'd sat with her a while and kind of she could see that I was sort of playing with her. So I felt like I could kind of play around with the situation a little bit, but I was aware to kind of test the ground and knew to kind of pull back and go back to the kind of more, I suppose, more comforting wording if it had an adverse reaction. But yeah, it's kind of something that really comes with experience, and being more gentle and reserved is always, I suppose, the safer side of that until you feel comfortable. If you're comfortable, then they'll feel comfortable, I think is also it. So if you're not confident in doing something, that will feed off and they'll pick up on that. So just do whatever you're comfortable with, ultimately.
Thank you for that answer as well. And Laura, I can see you just turned off your mic. Do you want to chip in?
Yeah, I was just considering to add to that. While intuition is super important, there are a couple of sort of usual do's and usual don'ts that did come up for me in like 8 years working with old name, PsyCare. And like consent is a super important one for that. And that goes with like between friends as well. Like Amanda said at the beginning, not everyone wants touch all the time. Not everyone wants to be hugged. Not everyone wants someone else completely in their face. So consent applies even in a situation, especially in a situation where someone needs care and comfort. And asking a whole lot of factual questions usually doesn't work very well on a difficult trip either. And so that's just stuff that I observe in groups that are having a difficult time, like people trying to comfort each other by asking, what's your name? Where are you from? Where's your tent? Where are you gonna go? And I'm just like, I would get freaked out by that if I wasn't tripping. So asking a whole lot of questions that are supposed to help might not always help. So really just, if you don't know what to do at all, the best thing you can bring to the situation is your presence and your grounding. We got those amazing things in our brain, they're called mirror neurons, and they automatically help us to imitate the behavior of people in front of us. So if I'm super chill and super relaxed and super safe, then this person that's buzzing around me usually can't help themselves from calming down a little bit with me. So I will just try to be super relaxed, and I try to deepen my breath, and I try to take time with answering questions, and that is usually contagious. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for such a well-rounded answer to both of you. And I'll just finish off by asking you one last question, because I know you want to go through the integration afterwards, but we've had this throughout the entire talk, but how can people get involved with PsyCare and Zendo? And now that music festivals aren't really going on, and we've got a pandemic going on, how can people get involved? I've seen a lot of people wanting to volunteer and help out.
So I suppose in terms of PsyCare, especially during this lockdown when events aren't really happening, we're definitely at the moment looking at calling out to people with different skills, whether it be kind of PR and marketing, whether it be applying for grants and fundraising, whether it be being able to do DIY work that can go to Italy and build stuff, but just getting involved in other ways that aren't literally just volunteering on the ground at festivals. Obviously, once festivals start up again, we've got an application form directly on our website, so people can apply that way and come and attend. But yeah, until events happen again, then we're definitely up for people volunteering other skills that they might have. So if people think of other ways that they could help us, then yeah, I'll go just a message.
Yeah, things have definitely taken a different form over the last year or so. I would really encourage people to sign up for a newsletter on our website that we don't oversend. So maybe once every 2 months, we'll send out a newsletter, and that will include possible events if there's any events coming up, but it will also include the training that we're providing. So we will have, we will be launching some trainings in around April, May of this year that we would love to have you participate in. So the best way to stay in tune with that is on our Zendo, it's zendoproject.org. On the website, you can sign up for newsletters. Additionally, if you have any burning questions that didn't get answered and you'd like to email us, you can email us at zendo@maps.org. And I can put those into the chat. And then, you know, we are on social media. We're regularly posting about different groups or organizations that we support or work with. And I would just encourage everybody to check out a new project coming out called Fireside Project. It's going to be a 24/7 psychedelic peer support line starting approximately in April. And I think initially they'll maybe only run 12 hours a day, but that will be something that the community has been asking for a really long time that I'm really excited about coming down the pipeline.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for answering all those questions. There were some more, and there was, I think, even one in German that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. So if you have time, if you can go through those, that'd be amazing. But I'll just let you finish off with your talk and then we can wrap up.
Please do try to pronounce it.
Oh, no, it'll be embarrassing. Oh.
Nice. Okay, I see that we literally got 2 minutes for the end of it. So, okay, right, aftercare. I think we all have so much experience with this. So since I see everyone super active in the chat, why don't you all put in your #1 self-care and aftercare advice in there, because I'm sure you all know something that we don't know yet. So feel free to pop in the chat what your #1 advice is for aftercare, while I share some of mine. Yeah, damn right. Journaling, breath, sleep, meditation, citrus fruit, nice one. Orally, drink plenty of water. Yeah, knowing what a come down is. It took me years to realize that a come down is a thing and I wasn't just depressed on a Tuesday. So understanding mechanisms really helps me. So what is a come down? How does oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, how does this work? All this stuff needs to refill. So at some point we can't just pour more powder on it. It won't do anything. Food, drinks, company, maybe arrange to call your best friend and tell them in advance that you're going to be vulnerable and they just need to be nice to you. Bubble baths, nice movie, a tidy tent, knowing where your tent is. That's a great one. Yeah, so really imagine you were like setting up a cozy evening for the person that you love most, and that person is you. So prepare something like that to come home to or to land at. Okay, a cat. Yeah, you know what? We actually do have a stuffed toy dog at Psycare. I love that dog. Okay, while I'm waiting for all your amazing advice to trickle in, I would pass on to Amanda and Chelsea for some integration, because integration is super important. It's not just preparation and having a good time or a whatever time, a non-judgmentally amazing time. It's also a lot of work that we can do after.
Can you hear me okay? Great, wonderful. Yeah, I would really encourage anybody who, so integration can be a long process, right? It doesn't necessarily happen the next day. It can happen even over years, depending on the scale of your experience. And so I would really encourage you, if you're feeling like that would be of benefit to your experience, to reach out. There's a great website called psychedelic.support. They have a very active integration list there for therapists and mental health workers who can support people with integration. And again, self-care, journaling, things you can do at home, talking with friends about your experience. Some of those things can be really helpful on a basic level.
Yeah, and I'd say in terms of the UK, definitely check out the TRIP network, which is TRIP with a double P network. They're you can find all sorts of psychotherapists that are sort of understanding of the psychedelic experience, research that's going on to get involved with any of the research that's happening. Yeah, it's just a really good hub for all that information.